Auburne's earliest music box. What do you think it is? Some of you know because we did have a preview, I'm afraid, for the stewards last week in the Heritage Centre. But for those of you who don't know, and also those who do know, there's a bit more about the history and what it actually is anyway. Now, I'm calling it a jukebox because ultimately it's a coin in the slot music box. What is a Nickelodeon if it wasn't that? Now, the person who made this, or at least people who pushed it around to the fetes and the fairs and to raise money, they think the mechanism employed by the coin and slot is one of the very earliest of its kind. I'm not suggesting that it's the earliest. If it was, this machine would be worth a fortune. But apparently there is no definitive time when someone said, light bulb, I developed a coin and slot machine. Very early. So for the last 30 years, this has been in the corner of the church tower in our ringing chamber, gathering dust, gathering cobwebs. It's not the oldest cobwebs we've got, by the way. We've got some that are hundreds of years old, and we just can't reach them. We could with this. Does anyone remember this? Yes. But no, it's not that. This is a 9-bell coin-operated Carillon, created by the then 21 years old William Lawrence of Auburn. That's not him, you can see that, can't you? He's got more hair. In about 1880. It was in desperate need of repair. In the corner, languishing, doing nothing. It wasn't actually rotting because it's fairly dry in the ringing chamber, but strings are broken, as you can see. And generally, it was in terrible shape. The mechanism had seized. My own expertise didn't stretch to having a go at restoring it. So quite out of character, I had a brainwave. Doesn't often happen. You ask Beryl. I tried the repair shop. Do you know all the repair shop? I contacted them. And after many emails, telephone calls, and they asked me to send a video showing what it was, why they wanted it, we wanted it repaired, was it the right sort of thing for them? And I was getting quite excited. And this is the video that I actually sent, the actual videos. So if you listen and look. My name's Terry Gilligan, and I've been a bell ringer at this lovely church since I was. Can you all hear this? And I would like to show you our Carillon, which has been living in our church belfry for the last 30 years. The reason I want to show you this Carillon is because it was made by a local ringer in about 1880, and his name was William Lawrence, and he's aged only 21. And because it's an antique, we have kept it housed in the ringing chamber in the corner where it's been gathering dust for the past 30 years, and we don't know if it works properly or not. So if I can just show you the workings of it and what I think is wrong with it, if you'd like to come round with me. This is a penny in the slot mechanism, and the reason it had a penny in the slot was because when it was built, it was made to be taken round to fairs and fetes and used for raising money. And because it's a Carillon, I reckon that it's possibly the world's first mobile jukebox. Now, around here, the penny goes in the slot here, goes down the chute and releases the mechanism here, which in turn releases a ratchet which is governed by a clockwork mechanism which is weighted by this weight. In turn, there's a drum here that has spikes all the way across, which when it's released, the spikes pull onto the keyboard here, which pull these strings attached to hammers which hit the bells. There are 9 bells here, and we're not certain if the drum is built to play just one hymn, although I was led to believe it was more than one hymn, so we don't know. The damage and the restoration that's required are principally these strings. There's at least 1 or 2 have perished. The hammers up here need refelting or some such material so as not to damage the bells when they touch them. And the whole of the casing needs looking at, and to a certain degree we think restoring. If I can go back, the clock mechanism we think works okay. Certainly the weight is doing its job against the ratchet. But we haven't been able to determine how the ratchet actually works to get it going and keeping it in place. And so that is obviously something to be looked at. So basically, the bells are okay. They don't need to be touched in any way. And they were actually cast in Alborn by a famous bell foundry called the Wells Bell Foundry about 200 years ago. And the Wells Foundry became world famous for producing this type of bell, and indeed church bells for many years. The Alborn Foundry lasted for about 150 years altogether, but the Wells were the principal founders. Okay, that was the actual video that I sent to the repair shop, and in fact they started getting interested in me telling them more about it. So I had to send a couple more videos with a deeper explanation of what was wrong with the machine. So after getting me excited, they asked me if it played Christmas carols, and this was in November. I said, well, how would I know? We don't know it works even. No idea what tunes are on there. So with that, they turned me down. Oh. Their loss, yes. Was I dejected? No, of course not. Why would you be? It's only a television program. Who cares? So we decided that, when I say we, bell ringers, of whom there are several here this evening, thank you very much. We decided that locally built piece of heritage should be restored by a local person. Keep it in the family. So someone who would be interested in a Heath Robinson type of artifact is basically, that's what it looks like, I can assure you. Answering the call was this person who soon realized there were 3 tunes: Last Rose of Summer, Bluebells of Scotland, and O Carissima, all well-known songs from the Victorian days. Don't forget. There he is, sitting over there. David Robinson. David, he answered my call. David lives at Woods End, so no one was going to trouble up there. He's got a lovely workshop, and so he squirreled it away and kept giving us progress reports. Meanwhile, of course, we had to get the thing down. So there's a carpet in the ringing chamber. We had to get that up. We didn't realize it had been nailed down. What would you do with a carpet? And Colin, Alan Heisman, David, my brother Sean, who used his van and helped us, Beryl, and myself set about uncovering the age-old hatch door. which is used for raising bells, mostly, not altogether. Note the builder's bag. We thought that would be a really good thing for carrying the machine. Yes, 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 you can laugh. So the hatch is open. There's the hatch. It opens out. It's not actually on hinges. The hinges were on there, but they've been taken off a long time ago. And they're two very heavy sort of like doors you have to pull away. And then you've got a 40-foot drop. That is, and it's quite daunting. If you don't like heights, and I'm one of those people, see me in the corner cowering. So, yeah, the builder's bag now carries the Carillon. The last time this hatch was opened was when George Newman, who was one of our ringers from Baden, he was lowered down when he suffered an aneurysm whilst ringing for a Sunday service about 20 years ago. And to tell you that story, long story short, doctor came, fire brigade came, ambulance came, paramedics, doctors came, and it's Cliff Rescue who got him down. So you can see how it's lowered, 40 feet up through that hatchway. This is actually this going down in the builder's bag. Bell ropes do come in handy for all sorts of things. They're not only very, very strong, they're long. And our bell ropes are 70 feet long. And they are quite old, actually. A lot of them are probably, I learned to ring when I was 10, 11, 12, 60 years ago. Yeah, so they were old then. There's Alan receiving the Carillon. And I'd just like to tell you a bit about the Carillon now. It has a headboard, and there it is. You'll see this in a minute, the headboard, which probably is a bit later than the Carillon itself, because it was taken up to London when William Lawrence was probably in his 30s after he got married at the end of the century. Anyway, this model, it says on there, working model of a Carillon. Above it, it says drop penny or any coin in the slot. And on the right-hand side, it says pennies for the school fete. And underneath that, it says pennies for the school fete. No, that's not, that's something else. I can't remember. You'll see it in a minute. Anyway, it then goes on to say this model, which is based on the Carillon in the church tower of Albourne, Wilts, was made about 1880 by W. Lawrence, then 21 years of age. In this model is incorporated a penny in the slot device, and it is believed to be the earliest application of this this now universal method. That's what it actually says on that board. Now, this would have been made probably in the 1920s, we think, because it's on hardboard, and hardboard wasn't known before that. So that gives us reason to believe that once it had gone from Albourne, which we know was at the end of the century, taken up to London, and they worked out there that it must have been one of the earliest coin in the slot mechanisms. In the Carillon, you can see some bells in there. Each bell carries the RW logo, which is for Robert Wells, and they were made in Albourne probably around about 1775. And looking at them a bit closer, you'll see the RW logo on the inside of the bell. Almost all of the, not almost all, most of the Wells handbells had RW written on the inside. All Albourne bells all together, actually. And if you go into the Heritage Centre, you'll see loads of bells in our bells display, and look on the rim like that, and you'll see RW, or there's Cores, or there's Reeds and Bridgmans, all sorts of different founders from Albourne, but they all had their own maker's mark. So William Lawrence, carpenter, lived on the green with his brother Walter and their parents. They were and their parents were accomplished bell ringers, and Walter, who was the younger brother, was a photographer. We know him to be a photographer because we collect postcards that he's actually developed, and they're very sought after because they're very rare. Walter also became church organist, and their house was also a hardware shop. And that is next to where Malcolm Fletcher lives. And I'll show you a picture of it in a minute from the time. But anecdotal evidence from the late Alan Keane describes how William moved to London towards the end of the century, taking the Carillon with him, is what I was saying just now. 100 years later, in the late 1980s, William's elderly grandson contacted Alan to offer the Carillon back to the Auburn Ringers. And Alan said, oh, no, yes, please, as soon as you can. And so it came to Auburn. There's the Lawrence's shop, hardware shop. You see it's thatched, and it was burnt down in the 1920s. The stables were also burnt down round about the same time, 24, something like that.
Stables 2021.
2021, yes, it's all the beginning of the 20s, and you weren't there at the time, Malcolm, were you? No. But and that really finished the Lawrences, because they lost their house, they lost their income, they lost their business. And but Walter actually continued in the church here, as he still lived locally. He became the choir master, organist, bell ringer. But William, we lost track of William until, as I say, in the 1980s. And this here is a set of handbells that we have in the tower that were donated to the ringers in 1889 by Walter and William Lawrence. And in front of it, if you know of it at all, is the Bryn Town Crier bell, which is actually dated something like 1910. It's a lot later. But the handbells themselves are all dated around about 1780, something like that. So after this evening, the Carillon will be on display at the Heritage Centre. Hooray! Fully restored, with a genius at the back of the room here, or by a genius, yeah. And with only a few updated necessary replacements. David has tried to keep it. He's been in conversation with bell ringers, Colin over there, and Richard, and Jenny, and Margaret, and who else is here as bell ringer? But Jan is sometime bell ringer. We wanted it kept as original as possible. And there's one or two things you'll see straight away are not original, but necessarily so. And it's a good thing that you can see that, actually, because one of the things that is replaced, the original is actually here, but we can't use it any longer because it's not strong enough. So, what a wonderful piece of our great village heritage coming home for us all to enjoy. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay. I would like now, David has very kindly come this evening. He was in Paris this morning, so I didn't know whether he'd be able to get here or not, but he's come specially here. He wanted to come here and take questions, and perhaps, I don't know, he's got a bit of paper. You're going to say something about it?
No, I'm just making notes.
Oh, okay. You know more about it than me. And Colin and Richard over here will unveil it, and we'll go through the final points of it. We'll actually get it working, but when we finish, come around and have a look at it, and they'll also they'll tell you what's what. Okay. We've got it set to one tune because it does play 3 tunes, but it's a bit difficult to get it exact. And don't forget, it is a rustic thing. So hang on, please.
What you should do is offer a prize to the person for the first penny in.
Does anyone have any pennies on them? Only works with pennies? Or euros? We've got the five apparently for the first one to put a penny in. We do have loads of pennies here, especially one. Loads of them. Okay. We'll demonstrate what we do. Here's this board, as I was saying, okay, that tells you what it's about, but that is original boards. That has not been replaced. That is original. Okay, I have gone over a bit in ink to put it up a bit. Okay. Yeah, go. It's not perfect, but David will tell you, when you come and have a look, please do come and have a look. It actually almost went over this evening. It really did almost go over, but we saved the day. There is a drive belt that David had to renew. This was the original, and it's made of leather, which is quite interesting. I like to keep it and put it on the top to show people. It's the original drive belt. The new one you'll see is actually in blue, but it's stretched a bit because it was new. It's stretched a bit, so that's one of the reasons why it's not very, it judges a bit. But you can sort of make out the tune. Do you want a different tune? Any requests? As long as it's Bluebells of Scotland, O Prisma, or Last Rose of Summer. Any requests?
It is number 2 at the moment. Okay.
You've got penny, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm trying to do it the right way. The problem is because it's been so often in my workshop, I just keep things here just to make it play rather than going through the whole. Takes a little while to start. Not too close. So the reason I'm staring at that is after I finished my workshop, Terry took it down and he's actually lifted some of the rests. So one of the things I had to replace is there's a rest. So as the hammer comes down, it hits the bell and then it bounces back. And some of them are being moved, I would say, too far away. So I think there was a comment some of you said it seemed a bit quiet, and that's the reason, because the weight of the hammers are not hitting the bell loud enough, hard enough to actually make a decent body.
And also, if they're resting on the bell itself,
yes,
it just clangs.
Well, it doesn't, and it has to actually lift it back also so the bell sounds. Yes, it is. So Terry mentioned some things I had to do to it. One of them was very obvious, was there's a whole load of strings, which half of them were broken and half of them were still there, but they all had to be replaced because the string was actually very rotten for most of them. Fortunately, I had enough of them to actually work out so I could reconnect them. And my notebook I've got in my workshop, I've got all the connections as they should be. As soon as I got it back, was the first thing I did is to make sure before anything else happened or any more got broken. Or Terry said, as in his video, he very carefully said, some of these are broken. Yes, I know they're broken, but I hope we didn't break any more. That's my worry. The other thing is mentioned the belt, the drive belt, that had to be replaced because if you see at just turn around my back. This original leather belt on the inside, which actually goes onto the drive from the clockwork mechanism, there's actually some studs on the inside. And over the years, and in particular probably more recently with me playing, it's wound a groove all the way around, so it no longer engages. So it just spins freely. So I looked around and I thought the easiest thing to do is actually use modern techniques and use a polyurethane belt. It's quite clearly not original and therefore won't be confused. This is nice blue, sort of like a fluorescent blue color. And the only other thing that I really had to do was clean everything. So I took everything literally apart, cleaned all the bearings, cleaned all the dust off, and it then generally worked. The clockwork mechanism didn't work when I first got it into my workshop. So I took that off first and just put it on my bench and just got it so it would run without driving any of the drums, etc. Then I knew probably the rest would do it. Should also say, I first came to this village 27 years ago, and I probably saw this in its broken state in the tower, at least in 2000, probably earlier. And at that point, it was always my ambition to repair it. To actually, it's something I wanted to do from the beginning. So the fact that Terry tried to take away my ambition by getting the repair shop to do something, but they rejected it. So, I now had a bit of time available. So I said, right, I'm going to do this, take it apart. And
say about the article you're going to do.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So some of you may know that I'm actually a model engineer as a hobby, and I'm actually going to write for the Model Engineer magazine an article which will be more of a technical nature about repairing this, but will also include obviously some of the historical artifacts of this, the period of time that it was built, the fact that it was built by somebody in this village, part of our ancient community, and also using bells which were cast here. So I think it's something good that we now have back in the village and working, and so hopefully you can see it and play with it.